If you've ever found yourself spiraling down a late night rabbit hole of what am I meant to do and why haven't I found it yet? And let's be honest, who hasn't? Then you're in the right place. I'm Theresa White, career clarity expert and 5-time certified career coach, and I'm here to help you navigate the question of how to find a career that truly lights you up. On Career Clarity Unlocked, we're all about those light bulb moments. I'm talking to people who are still trying to figure out what they're meant to do, coaching them live to reach that magical, yes, this is it moment. And we'll also hear from those who've already found their dream careers and figure out exactly how they did it. Whether you're looking for inspiration or actionable advice on finding a career you love, I've got you covered. Time to unlock some career clarity. Let's dive in. Welcome back to Career Clarity Unlocked. I'm so glad that you're here with me today. And I want to start off by saying that I see you. I know so many of us are struggling with burnout, feeling stuck, being misaligned, or just not feeling where we want to be in work or in life. And sometimes we keep repeating those same oddly familiar patterns, even if they didn't feel good. And that realization prompted this podcast episode. And this podcast episode is going to be different. Usually I'm very well prepared and researched and show up with makeup. Today I'm just here really raw and with all these thoughts that were flying through my head, coming just from my therapy session and really understanding my attachment on a deeper level, and then having that moment of how that isn't just playing out in life, but in our careers. So I will be a lot more vulnerable today and really speaking from the heart of how this has been for me, but then also sharing my insights and other thoughts that I started to have around this of why we might be ending in workplaces that aren't aligned and that aren't right for us. And maybe some of that goes back to our early childhood. And I don't know if you've heard about attachment styles before, but research has shown that our attachment style forms by age 3. And that can influence everything from our leadership style to how we handle feedback at work and pretty much all our relationships. So in today, we're going to dive deep into the ideas of attachment theory and find out what it is, how it shapes the puzzle piece that we've become, and how that same piece often ends up trying to fit into the wrong, unhealthy workplaces. And why this matters so much is because we often, when we talk about attachment theory, we talk about how that shows up throughout our life, specifically in romantic relationships or sometimes in parenting. But they show up everywhere. They show up in how you respond to authority, how you navigate team dynamics, how you handle burnout, and maybe even how you choose work in the first place. And then when we start to understand and unravel these patterns, that can get us to another level of career clarity, healing, and hopefully finally finding work that feels safe and meaningful and energizing. So what we're going to do in this episode, I'm going to start to break down the basic of attachment theory in everyday terms for those who are not familiar with this idea yet. We're going to explore how these unconscious patterns show up in our professional lives. Then we're going to talk about how do we reframe past experiences with more compassion, because I'm really big on not shaming ourselves for what we went through. Is how can we have compassion that we did the best that we could at the time with the tools available to us, and to have a lot of compassion for ourselves. And then talk about how you can use this insight to really make radically better career decisions. And by the end of the episode, I really hope that you have an understanding of what the attachment blueprint is in general and for you personally, that you can recognize or start to recognize how this might be shaping your career choices, and what you need to know to begin making new, conscious, empowered choices in your professional path. Before we dive in, if you're new here, I'm Theresa White, a career clarity expert and 5-time certified career coach, and the only coach on the market who guarantees you career clarity in just 30 days. And since 2020, I've helped over 600 women leave purposeless, draining jobs and step into work that lights them up. And this episode might be a game changer for you too. My intention for this episode is to be validating, to be gentle, and to be full of aha moments. And I want you to walk away understanding not just what's been happening in your career, but to start thinking about why and how we can start to change that. And before we go into that, I'm going to start with a little bit of a background of attachment theory to the level that I have an understanding of it. And understanding the 4 main attachment styles can give us really powerful insights into how we operate in our lives and in our workplaces, how we handle authority, feedback, boundaries, collaboration, and even burnout. So what are the attachment styles? There are 4 core attachment styles, and they were originally studied in childhood, but they do show up in our adult lives too, especially in how we relate to others and how we experience safety and stress. The first attachment style is secure attachment. Secure attachment forms when you grow up with caregivers who were responsive and consistent. The baby and the toddler feel safe, seen, supported. In the workplace, this might look like you feel confident in your abilities. You feel comfortable giving and receiving feedback. You naturally have healthy boundaries, and you have a natural trust in leadership and colleagues. Then there is the anxious attachment style. That formed through caregivers that were inconsistent, sometimes available and sometimes not. And in those instances, the child learns to stay hypervigilant and emotionally attuned to keep the connection. In the workplace, that might play out in constantly seeking reassurance or validation, in overfunctioning or overworking just to prove our worth, in taking things more personally, like silence or delayed feedback, and in the fear of being found out or not being good enough. The third attachment style is the avoidant attachment. That results out of growing up as caregivers that were emotionally unavailable or dismissive. And these children learn to self-soothe and avoid vulnerability, often at all costs. And then when we take that into the workplace, that can look like being highly independent, really strongly disliking micromanagement, maybe avoiding collaboration, avoiding any kind of vulnerability, having a I'll do it myself mentality, and often struggling to ask for help or to express needs. And then the fourth attachment style is a mix of anxious and avoidant. We call it often this disorganized attachment. And that often is linked to a chaotic, neglectful, or even abusive early environment. And that is a child who wants connection, but is also afraid of it. And in the workplace, that can show up as having a really deep fear of authority, of rejection, or being in trouble, having very high levels of internal stress, even in normal work situations, where we might sabotage opportunities or swing between people-pleasing and withdrawal, and an environment that feels emotionally unsafe, even if it looks on the outside like it is not that bad. So I want to ask or invite you to start thinking about if you ever find yourself over-explaining in emails to make sure no one's upset with you. Or do you tend to pull away and go quiet when you're stressed or overwhelmed at work? Or maybe are you someone who takes on every task so you won't have to rely on anyone else? And I want to really reassure you here, none of those are flaws. They are learned survival strategies. They helped you navigate your earliest relationships. And now they are your GPS. And sometimes some strategies on this GPS are outdated and not serving us the way we want anymore. And the beautiful thing is that our brain has the ability to rewire itself, to learn, to grow, to evolve. So even if we grew up with an insecure attachment style, that is not the blueprint for the rest of our lives. We have the ability to change. And that is the beautiful and hopeful message that I really want to carry through this podcast, is that, yes, growing up with an insecure attachment style makes life harder. And I'm saying this from my own experience. But we have the power to change. My own attachment style is a disorganized attachment style. And I relate to all of this very, very deeply. And one of the big ahas that I had very recently as I was thinking and learning more about it is I have this relational terror that I'm driven by, that I have to preserve connection at all costs. And as an adult, that doesn't necessarily make much sense of why I would operate from that blueprint. But I was listening to a podcast episode that was so eye-opening. Shout out to We Can Do Hard Things here. Best podcast ever. And they were talking about, for a baby, connection to their caregiver is life or death. A baby can't feed themselves. They can't care for themselves. They're helpless. So that connection to the caregiver is literally life or death for them. So in early childhood, we have to mold ourselves into whatever piece can fit into that puzzle piece, that can fit into our caregiver's puzzle piece, because our life depends on it. And depending on what our experiences are growing up throughout our lives, that can be even more and more reinforced. And I am still operating from the blueprint that I have to preserve connection at all costs, because it's a matter of life and death. And that realization is a first step in healing for me, because now I can come in with a different perspective and think about that I am not 9 months old anymore. I'm actually 40 years old. And while relationships are very important, not every relationship is one that my life depends on. And I can make and start making different choices. And those different choices can include setting boundaries, speaking up for my needs, being okay with receiving or giving feedback, not having to prove myself or overfunction constantly. And I'm saying all this as it being a really big work in progress. That's another lesson I just recently took away from the We Can Do Hard Things podcast, is that oftentimes we hear people that go through a healing journey and you see the before and the after, and before was all messy and bad and terrible, and after it's all rainbows and sunshine and butterflies. And I want to take away that illusion that there is a very messy middle, and I'm right in that very messy middle of trying to heal, grow, move forward, go back, going through this roller coaster. So please don't be hard on yourself if you are people pleasing, if you are struggling with setting boundaries. We're doing this to keep ourselves safe, and we're wired to do that. So that goes back to having compassion to ourselves. And truly, every attachment style shows up for a reason. It's not that we just choose and be like, oh, I love being avoidant and taking care of all my emotions myself. No, it was a smart adaptation, like actually a genius adaptation of our brain to keep us safe. We needed to do that. And then I want to reinforce is the good news here is it's not fixed. You can develop and earn secure attachment. You can learn new patterns, starting with gaining awareness of where you are. So now that we've got a clear picture of our attachment style, let's talk about what this means in your career and for you professionally. So coming up, I want to explore how these attachment styles might play out in real workplace scenarios and how you can start shifting those patterns for more ease, confidence, and alignment. And earlier on, I brought up that analogy of the puzzle piece, and that for me resonates so deeply, of how we shape ourselves like a puzzle piece to fit our earliest emotional environments. The shape we take then follows around in adulthood, especially in everything there that involves human relationships, but also happen to be there at work, where we often to try to fit into familiar, but not always healthy dynamics, specifically for this podcast episode, workplace dynamics. And I really think like that baby becomes born and the baby is whole and so innocent and so deserving. But when we are born, our life depends on our connection to our caregiver. That's how we are hardwired. Our brain is wired for connection. So if they are not responsive, and often to no fault of their own, we have to mold ourselves into a piece that fits and can keep that connection. And then we become this puzzle piece. And then the rest of our lives, we walk around as this puzzle piece, trying to find places we fit into. It's then just recreate our earliest experiences, environments. And this plays out in so many ways, right? Early on, we learn, in order to keep that connection, we learn how do we need to be? How do we need to show up? What do we need to suppress? What do we need to hide? What do we do to get love? How do we need to act to be approved of, to feel safe? And that's when our brain learns you maybe have to become extra responsible. You maybe have to become hyper independent. You maybe have to be the peacemaker. You have to be a high achiever or someone who fades into the background and becomes invisible. And then you'll learn whatever you need to do to stay and keep that connection. And this shape is your early adaptive strategy. It is literally how your nervous system learned to stay safe in relationships. And these strategies, again, they are not random. They are genius, intelligent responses to the emotional climate you grow up in. But then over time, that shape locks in. And even after by age, we outgrow the environment it was designed for, we're still wired and responding in the same way, unless we become conscious of it and then go the process of healing and changing and making conscious different choices. And so without even realizing it, maybe you might bring that same puzzle piece that you grew up developing into your professional life. I have, most definitely, and still am. And you might unconsciously look for spaces, roles, or manager where that familiar shape fits, even if that leads then to stress, to burnout, or emotional pain. And I want you to take a moment here to think about if this sounds familiar. Do you keep ending up in roles where you feel invisible, overworked, or underappreciated? Or do you find yourself needing your boss's approval the way you once needed it from a parent? Or do you shy away from collaboration because you've always had to rely on yourself? Is it really hard for you to delegate because it's so hard to trust that others will complete the work? And I want to share a couple of examples here that I've seen with friends, family, clients, and myself of how this can be connected. One example is burnout that comes from overfunctioning. So I had a client, let's call her Maya, and she constantly over-delivered. She had to, it wasn't a choice she made, like I want to over-deliver every single day. She over-delivered like her life depended on it. Oh yeah, I'm that person too, by the way. And she didn't know how to rest. And once she gained this awareness and was able to realize that that was a blueprint she grew up with in childhood, where her worth was tied to how helpful and how competent she was, that was a light bulb moment. And then she saw how growing up with that blueprint then translated at work into saying yes to everything, even when it hurt her, and even when it led her to burn out. Over and over, no matter which environment, which company, which manager, which team she worked on, it was her who kept burning herself out. Another example I see quite commonly, and I'm going to use this example of my client, I'm going to call her Jess, who would spiral if her manager gave her that vague feedback. And she gained that understanding that it's not just receiving that vague feedback in that moment, but it really brought up and echoed how she grew up never quite knowing where she stood with her parents. There was always this uncertainty. Do they love me? Do they hate me? Am I okay? Am I not okay? And she constantly had to work hard to earn love. Not surprisingly, the workplaces she worked in then became other stages where she felt like she had to earn love, respect, acceptance, recreating that pattern that was so familiar to her on an unconscious level. Or the example of avoiding vulnerability or collaboration or delegation. I've worked with women who really pride themselves on being lone wolves. Not because necessarily they prefer it, because early on they learned no one would show up for them. Asking for help was a weakness, and if we asked for help, no one came. So what do we learn to do? We learn to do it all on our own. We learn that depending on others is not good. It's not a strength. It's not going to get us respect or love or attention. So we learn to do it all on our own. And then that plays out in the workplace. And I want to emphasize again that none of these patterns are flaws. They are survival skills. But those early blueprints can become outdated while our brain builds them in such a genius way to keep us safe. It doesn't serve us anymore when the environment changes. And when that puzzle piece no longer fits the career or the life that you're desiring or the one that you want, that's then when tension shows up. So what does this mean? One, we often repeat emotional patterns because they feel familiar and not because they're healthy for us. And the workplace can unconsciously become a reenactment of old relational wounds until we bring awareness to the script that we're playing out. And the good news here again is that once we see the puzzle piece, we have the power to reshape it. We can stop contorting ourselves to fit environments that weren't built for us, that aren't right for us, that aren't healthy. So now that you might be starting to see the puzzle piece you might be carrying into your life and into your work, let's take one step deeper. So in this next part of the podcast, I want to go into reframing your past workplace experiences, especially the painful or hard or confusing ones that might still haunt you to this day, through this lens of attachment, so that you can let go of the shame that never belonged to you in the first place, validate your story, and start building something new. And the main idea here is that your difficult work experiences, and that can be anything from burnout, rejection, toxic bosses, micromanagement, chronic self-doubt, are not proof that you're broken. They are echoes of your earliest attachment patterns. They can be echoes of your earliest attachment patterns. There's also other explanations for sure. And your response to them were not defective or wrong. They were simply adaptive. I want to pause here and really acknowledge something important. If you have ever had a painful, a confusing, an experience at work that does not feel good, first of all, you're not alone. I talk to so many women every day who struggle with what they're experiencing at work. I personally have cried in the work bathroom many more times than I can count. And I know that I'm not the only one. And just the fact that we experience that doesn't mean that we're flawed or weak or too sensitive or something's wrong with that. It often means that we're showing up as a nervous system that was trained to survive. And it was trained to survive by maybe fawning, overworking, shutting down, walking on eggshells, whatever we had to do to preserve our earliest connections and keep ourselves alive. And our reaction to these situations are not random. They are truly protective strategies that were wired in early and refined over the years, trying to keep us safe and trying to maintain connection. So this attachment theory gives us a new lens to look back on those experiences. And instead of seeing that toxic manager or role as a failure or something you couldn't handle, maybe you can start to ask, What was familiar here? What part of me was trying to earn love or stay invisible or control chaos because that's what I've always done or because that's what felt safe to me? For example, if you kept over-delivering and still felt unappreciated, it may not mean that you weren't good enough. It may mean you were trying to recreate a pattern where love and safety were earned, not given. And you try desperately to give more, to over-deliver more, to finally get that appreciation or that respect that you so desperately want. And I want to contrast that with someone with a very secure attachment style. They might go into the same situation simply knowing that they're inherently worthy and appreciated and valued, and don't feel the need to consistently over-deliver and prove themselves because they have that knowing inside of themselves that someone with an insecure attachment style might not have. Or to use another example, if you froze up in meetings or you avoided to speak up, maybe it's not just a lack of confidence. Maybe it's your nervous system that was scanning for a threat in every interaction. Maybe that is your nervous system recognizing that for a very good reason, telling you, do not do this, do not speak up, don't take up space, don't make yourself known, because something bad can happen. And your brain is not saying that just for fun. It is because it learned at some point in your life that if you do that, something bad happens. So now it's keeping you safe. And there's so many ways this is showing up for me personally, definitely in having to prove my worth, constantly over-delivering, having to be perfect, not being able to make a mistake. Because if I don't prove my worth, if I'm not people-pleasing, if I'm setting boundaries, a part of me is scared to death that I might lose connection. And that is leading to me overworking, to not saying no, to taking on things I shouldn't be taking on. And it's been a pattern throughout my entire career, no matter where I am. And it's not that, I want to go back to this messy middle. It's not that once I recognized it, I was like, oh, let me turn this off and I'm all good now. It is a daily struggle where one part of me says, don't do this. Don't be visible. Don't be seen. This is dangerous. Don't put yourself out there. Another part is like, well, but I need to put myself out there to prove myself, to prove my worth. And another part then steps in and says like, but you have to put yourself out there. You have to prove your worth. You have to prove yourself to earn love and connection. And these brains, if you ever saw the movie Inside Out, which I personally love, and it's inspired by IFS, internal family systems, it's like all these parts that are fighting over the console, and it becomes really, really overwhelming. Very overwhelming. And it could be looking similar or completely different for you. And there can be, honestly, a real heartbreak in this awareness of how we keep recreating patterns that we grew up with. And maybe you realize that you've stayed too long in a role that wasn't good. Maybe that you realized you dimmed yourself down, or that you said yes to the wrong things out of fear and not in alignment. But what's so important is that you remember that you did the best you could with the tools and awareness that you had at the time. That version of you was trying to protect you. And it was doing a brilliant job protecting you in the ways it knew how to keep you safe. And now maybe this can be a start of new awareness. And with that awareness, gaining the opportunities to choose differently. And I want to invite you here to carve out some time for yourself to journal on these questions. 1, what's one past work experience that hurt, that you now see through a different lens? And I want to emphasize here, it's not hurt in a big way. It can be. But what's matter is how it feels inside. Maybe it was something small. Maybe it was just an email that other people would have been like, whatever, nothing. This person always has something negative to say. But it hurt you on the inside. That's valid. The way it impacted you is what counts. That it is valid. So what are the work experience that hurt you? And looking at it from that attachment and blueprint we developed early in our lives, can we look at it now through a different lens? And what were you trying to protect? Was there a part of you that was really protective? Was it afraid something would happen if it didn't protect you in that way? Or what were you trying to prove? What puzzle piece were you trying to fit into? And please let this be a moment of clarity, not criticism, because awareness is the first step to change. I truly, truly believe it, and I'll say it again, that you did the best you could with the knowledge and awareness you had at the time. And you did it. You got through these really hard times. And maybe going forward with a little bit more awareness, we can choose one tiny step at a time to make choices that bring us to healthier outcomes. And the way you've responded to work has possibly been shaped by what you've learned to do to stay emotionally safe early on. It's not your fault. It's simply your wiring. And again, the wiring can be rewired. That's the most beautiful part of attachment theory. With awareness, you can stop trying to fix yourself, but start creating environments that truly fit you. So now that we looked back with compassion, let's talk how we can move forward and use that knowledge to move forward with intention. So in this next part, I'm going to walk you through how to begin making career choices from a place of clarity and self-trust, instead of the automatic wiring that we might be growing up with. So once you've recognized your attachment patterns and how they've shaped your career story, the next step is not to fix yourself, but it's to move forward with more self-awareness, compassion, and agency. And if you've been nodding along or having a little light bulb go off here or there during this episode, you've already done something really, really powerful. You paused just long enough to notice. And that noticing is the start of repatterning. And from that awareness, a real change becomes possible. And again, this is not a flip of the switch. I so desperately wish it would be. But I'm learning day by day that no matter how hard I try, it's not a flip of the switch. It is a practice that takes so much strength and courage. And it's not, absolutely not about becoming someone else. It's becoming more yourself in a space that actually supports you. And I can't emphasize that enough, that all of the work I do, the career clarity work and that self-awareness, is not about you being someone else. It is about how can we untangle what is all the wiring, all that social conditioning that was put on us growing up and dimmed our life and made us like a little bit contorted and not quite true to who we are and not feeling fully aligned. How can we remove some of that we can become more of who we truly are and then make choices that are more aligned with who we are? And once we bring this awareness into relationships, or in this context into professional relationships, we can start to react slightly different. And a really powerful technique is to pause and observe. Before reacting at work, in whatever ways you sometimes react, maybe it's over apologizing, maybe it's shrinking back, maybe it's overcommitting, just to take a breath and ask, what part of me is activating right now? Am I responding from the present or from an old script? Does this feel good and aligned in my body? And use those workplace moments as cues to check in with your nervous system. And not just with your to-do list, but with your system of how does this feel inside of me? And then start naming those patterns without shame. You can start gently labeling what you notice. Oh, there's my anxious attachment pattern kicking in. Or yeah, I'm going to avoid here because I feel emotionally unsafe. Or yeah, I'm gonna overwork because I'm terrified of disappointing someone. And that creates space between you and the pattern. And then you can make a choice on how you want to respond to it. Maybe in a new and in a more empowered way, if that feels aligned. Now, one big thing I struggle with, setting healthy boundaries. Again, I wish I could tell you this is a flip of the switch and you're all good. But this is a hard one to learn or unlearn, to unlearn that boundaries somehow make you bad, unsafe, not good enough. That no, you're allowed to have boundaries. That's okay. Absolutely. If a boundary feels good to you, then that yes. So if you're the one who always says yes to everything, the first step can be to just try pausing long enough to think and breathe for a moment before agreeing to that extra task. If you're asked to take on something and you usually say yes, next time, can you pause for a second? And if you need more time, you can say, I just have a lot on my mind right now. Can I give you an answer in 10 minutes? You go back to your desk and you think, if I take on this task, how will this feel inside of me? Seeing why am I saying yes? Is it because of positive reason? That can be, does it give me exposure in the company? Does it allow me to build meaningful relationships? Does it allow me to expand my skill set? Then yes, there are reasons to say yes to things. But am I saying yes because I'm afraid my manager will be upset and mad at me? Am I afraid that they'll think I'm not good enough? Am I afraid because they think less of me if I say no? Those are clues to pause and assess how you want to respond to that request. Or for those of us in leadership positions, if we tend to avoid giving feedback, we can start experimenting and thinking about that. If we give someone constructive feedback, what do we think will happen? And there's a part of us protecting us here that's saying like, do not give feedback. Do not tell them they did something wrong because they're going to hate you or they're going to whatever our parts say. And when we become aware of that, we can say like, oh, I recognize I'm being activated. There's a part of me that is really afraid that if I give constructive criticism or constructive feedback, that something negative will happen. Now I took a step back and observed my reaction to it, and I can assess if that is really likely to happen. What are the benefits of doing it? Could there be possibly another outcome? And if it still feels hard, that is okay. And then maybe you can experiment with asking for it from someone that you really trust and practice in small steps. And then also being really clear about seeing boundaries, not as walls around that, but as clarity, because those boundaries really tell you and they tell others, here's what I need to feel safe, grounded, and able to contribute fully. And I wish we had all managers that would respect and understand that. But truly, our boundaries allow us to contribute to our full potential, to perform our best work. And protecting our boundaries doesn't just serve us, but it also serves our workplace, because we can do the best work when we feel our best. Another great strategy is to seek out supportive environments. And when you are looking at making a career change, if you're currently job seeking, really look at workplace cultures. Do they value psychological safety over hustle culture? Do they normalize rest, growth, feedback? Do they invest in their people and not just their performance? Do they see you as a human being, or do they see you as a machine? And then also starting to recognize your self-worth and knowing that you deserve to work somewhere that feels emotionally safe, not just intellectually stimulating or giving you a paycheck. No, you deserve to work somewhere that feels emotionally safe. And you can start asking questions during interviews about their leadership styles, about their communication styles, about how conflict is handled, to get clues if this feels safe and aligned for you. And when we grew up in an environment that doesn't always feel safe and good and healthy, it's really hard for us to recognize that when we're in a similar environment again, that we deserve better. We think this is just how it is. So many of my clients, they don't believe that better workplaces exist because they haven't experienced it. And If you've never experienced that, how you're supposed to really believe that exists, that exists. And then they land a new job, and even years later, they're still like, Theresa, I did not believe you it was possible. I know you told me 100 times. I did not believe you. And look at me now. I feel so supported. The people around me are cheering me on. I'm growing. I'm tapping into my full potential. I'm getting promoted. I'm respected, valued. It's possible, and you deserve that. You deserve that so much. Your past doesn't define you. You are inherently worthy of deserving to be in environments that lift you up and make you feel good to be in. And if you're also someone who's walking that healing journey, remember that healing isn't linear, right? One day we're up here, the next day we're down here. And we'll still get triggered. We might still fall into old patterns. Yeah, I do all the time. That's not failure. It's feedback. And every one of those moments is a new opportunity for us to show up differently. And if we just choose one in the next week, that's huge. And I want to invite you to really tap into the self-compassion. And at the end of a tough work day, when things just feel really heavy and draining and not aligned, ask yourself, what did I need today that I didn't get? What would I say to a friend who felt like this? And if you know me, I'm a huge fan of mental health and therapy has been so incredibly life-changing for myself. If you feel that, yeah, this really resonated and there seem to be some deeper roots as you were listening to this episode, maybe this is a really good time to get support. Therapy, coaching, somatic work, all of that can help you unlearn old patterns and reclaim your career on your terms. And if you're ready for career clarity and direction that's really rooted in who you are and not just who you had to become to survive, I'd love to help you. That's exactly what I do in my Career Clarity Coaching program. You'll find the link to book a call with my team in the show notes, and I promise you, you will feel like you belong, you will feel heard and seen and supported. So as we wrap this up, I want you to remember that your old patterns don't define you. They protect you. And now, as you're gaining new awareness, you get to decide what your next chapter looks like. And you can get in the driver's seat of your career. You don't have to let it happen to you anymore. You can make conscious, informed choices and stop looking for environments where you have to be this puzzle piece that you can contort yourself to fit in and you end up being like a square peg in a round hole. But you can make choices of finding environments and roles that fit who you are, that feel aligned and safe and healthy and value you. And again, you deserve that. It's possible and you deserve that. And if you're saying like, no, Theresa, no, I don't. I get it. I get it. But maybe you can take it in just a little bit that yes, you deserve this. It's possible for you and you can get there. So we covered a lot today, and it means so much that you're here with me and went on this journey with me through attachment theory and all my thoughts on how this is playing out to this day in our workplace. We explored today how our attachment style formed very long before our first day at work, but might still be shaping the way we work, relate, and respond to everything in our lives and in our careers. And then we looked at how we became that puzzle piece to survive and stay connected in childhood, and how that can show up till today and shape how we show up at work and in life. I hope you were able to recognize and see some old patterns, maybe reframe past work trauma with compassion and start creating new self-honoring patterns moving forward. And please, please know that you are not broken. You are not behind. You haven't done anything wrong. You are exactly where you're supposed to be. and you've been navigating with a map that was drawn by a much younger you. But now you get to revise the route. If this episode resonated and you're ready to stop operating from a blueprint that isn't quite aligned, maybe burnout, people-pleasing, perfectionism, overperforming, and you're ready to finally create a career aligned with who you truly are, please go ahead and book a consultation call with my team. You're gonna love, no matter what you decide to do, it's a no-pressure call. You will feel so heard and seen and understood, and just that can be the most powerful experience to start rethinking how you want to move forward in your career. And we'll also share with you my proven process to help you gain career clarity in record time, so that you no longer have to feel lost, second guessing, and that you're not going to have to settle anymore. The link to book a call with my team is in the show notes, and we truly can't wait to meet you. And it would mean the world to me if you try out some of the self-awareness tips that we covered today. Maybe labeling your response pattern in a moment of stress, or just pausing for a moment before saying yes when you mean maybe. And if you do it, I would love to hear about it. Please send me a DM on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, or send me an email and let me know what you noticed. Thank you so much for listening and for being willing to look at your story through a new, hopefully a more compassionate lens. This kind of work is brave. You're rewriting generational patterns, and that's huge. Next week, I've got something really special for you again. It is a live coaching session with an incredible woman who's transitioning out of a decade-long career in finance to launch her coaching business. We'll talk about how she found career clarity, uncovered her unique differentiation, and why waiting until you feel ready might be the biggest trap. So if you've ever dreamed about pivoting, but you feel stuck in fear, this episode is one you don't want to miss. Make sure that you subscribe to the podcast, and I would love to see you back here next week on Career Clarity Unlocked. And that's a wrap for today's episode of Career Clarity Unlocked. If you're feeling stuck in that what's next spiral and are ready to finally break free, let's chat. You can book your free career clarity call where we'll uncover what's really important to you, tackle any obstacles holding you back, and map out your best next step. Schedule your free 30-minute call today on careerbloomcoaching.com. And before you head out, be sure to follow us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify so you never miss an episode. If today's conversation gave you new insights and inspiration, please leave a review. It really helps us reach more amazing listeners like you. And don't forget to share this episode with a friend or on social media. Your support truly means the world. Thanks for hanging out with me, and I'll see you next time.